Sure, I am just logging into my cloud account right now. So hope everyone have logged into your cloud account, Oracle cloud account. Once you are into the cloud account, here this is where under the menu section under the databases, under MySQL database MDS can be configured. Here you can just go into the DB system. This is where you can configure your MySQL system. So once you are into the MySQL DB system, this is where you can create a MySQL DB. So you can just name the whatever, you can just select the compartment where you want to keep your MDS system, and then just name the instance, whatever you would like to call. And just keep it MDS instance. So you can, if you'd like to add any description, and then in terms of the, you can just select the HeatWave as your DB system, because we are going to attach the HeatWave cluster in the future. So that is why we are not taking the standalone or a high availability instance. We are taking the HeatWave cluster. Then you can just set up the your credits for your database. Could be the username is admin, and at the same time password is, as we mentioned in the here in the system. So we are setting up the password as admin .123. So you can just confirm the password. So then once you go for a configuring network, for this lab we have already set up the VCN. So you can set up the basic VCN out of basic VCN under the network section that can be reused. I'll be coming back to how to set up the VCN. Once you set up the VCN, that will be visible here. So I'm just setting up the MySQL VCN and the private subnet, which I'm going to use for setting up this MDS instance. So you can set up the configure. You can just configure the which is in the complete AD. So you can just you can leave it as it is for a time being. And then at the same time, you can go for a storage of 1224 GB, which is nothing but one terabyte of. And then you can leave this backup plans for a time being as an initial steps. You can just leave this.
Viresh, 1 second. Can you please share the live lab link in QA session or the chat window?
Okay.
Everybody.
Yeah, Viresh, okay. If you want, I can take over from here, and then maybe you can do the analytics.
Sure.
All right, let me just share my screen. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the live lab. Let me just is everyone able to see my screen? Yeah. So please use this to sign up for your free cloud account. You can use the QR code displayed on the screen, or I will also put up this in the chat box. Please do use the same email with which you registered.
Shadab, screen size is very small. Not sure.
Yeah. All right. I will just
maximize it.
Is that better or?
No, it's the same setup. You can just go to the presentation mode.
Yeah. Is it better or still the same?
It's the same setup still. See.
Okay, just one.
The screen is kind of compressed. Yeah.
Yeah, just one sec. All right, let me just do that again.
Sure.
I'll just share my desktop. I think that'd be just better. All right, can you guys see my screen now, or it's still the same?
Yeah, it's better. It's perfect, Shida.
Okay. Look, guys. So this is the QR code for the live lab. If you can, Virish, please put that also in the chat window so we can then get started.
Sure, I've already shared it in the chat window, so you can get started.
Yeah, thank you. And look, first, please use the email which you have registered for this event for the sign up. If everyone is okay with the link, I think the sign up link has already been shared earlier in the chat. Okay, so welcome to the HeatWave and Oracle Analytics Cloud. I think with Nipun's session, I think one has got an idea of what MySQL HeatWave is all about and how we are positioned amongst a unique position amongst the other cloud data warehouses. This is more of a hands-on lab just to give you guys an idea of how you can get started on OCI with MySQL HeatWave. How can you spin up a cluster, set up the networking, some of the other constructs in your cloud account, and get started quickly. What we would also be providing is a sample data set, which we will load to this MySQL HeatWave cluster, which we will create, and run some queries. And then my colleague Virish will go ahead and show everybody what you can do in terms of the integration with the analytics offering on OCI, which is Oracle Analytics Cloud. We might not be able to provision some of the infrastructure related to the Oracle Analytics Cloud, but we have already provisioned that in a development environment. So we will run you guys through how you can access it. So has everyone been able to sign up for your tenancy? You should basically be at the screen where there would be some information required in terms of your email, your location, and your first name and last name. There is no credit card required for this sign up. So this is especially for the Developers Day India, we have waived off the requirement to have a credit card for sign up. So please go ahead, get your information in, and you should receive, once you've put in all the information, you should, within a few seconds or at the max a few minutes, you should be receiving an email saying your cloud account is ready, and you should get a sign up URL. Yes, and one thing is there is a verification just of a mobile number. So that would be your final step before you actually hit go ahead. And this information, so you will not be required to add any payment related information. So this is just on this lab, but with today's free promo, you won't be required to enter any credit card information. All right, Shiva, maybe can we give the audience maybe another 5 minutes for everyone to provision the account before we get started?
Yeah, you can just give a couple of minutes because most of the team have already provisioned the accounts.
Okay.
Just 2 minutes and we'll start.
All right, sure. Shiva, should we get started, I guess?
Yes, please.
All right. So if you have gone through the process of the sign up, you should have received the URL, and your cloud account name is basically what was selected when you signed up. So you would come to a page where you can actually get started with logging into your tenancy. So for those of us who are new to OCI, this is what the login page typically looks like. This is my tenancy name. This is the identity provider. So this is the identity cloud service, which your email must have been provisioned to Oracle Identity Cloud Service. So if you go from the login page, if you've entered, it'll go and ask you for a username and password. I've already got this for my email address. So it would be basically the username, the email address you have signed up with. Use the username and the password which you created. And once you sign in, you would be seeing a screen like this. So before we get started, let me go back to the lab and show you maybe just a brief summary of what we're going to do in the lab today. So with the first part of the lab, which is the provisioning of your cloud tenancy out of the way, the first section would be where we will provision the core infrastructure to provision the HeatWave MySQL HeatWave cluster. We will go ahead and create a virtual cloud network and add the MySQL default port to some of the rules to allow base connections from your instances. We would also create a Bastion or a jump host so that you can log into your MySQL HeatWave instance. MySQL HeatWave on OCI, keeping security into perspective, is a fully private service. So you cannot have the MySQL database having with a public IP. So even if on your network you had allowed for public IPs, the HeatWave cluster would always create with a private IP. So that is the reason we would require a Bastion host to connect to it. We would then provision the Bastion host, install some of the tools for MySQL, and then we will go ahead and download the data set. The last two sections would be would be to create an analytics cloud instance, which we would not be doing in this lab due to the brevity of time. It will not be possible to have that instance up and running in the amount of time we have. But we will go ahead and create an instance of MySQL in the cloud. The further on the labs, I think my colleague Varish, he would use one of the other existing environments to show how that integration can be made. So let's just to get started. If you're again new to OCI, just go back to your console. You click the hamburger menu here. The first thing is to get started is to have a virtual cloud network. Go here. So when you get access to your account or your tenancy, the first thing you have to do is to look at your compartment. To get started with, you do not need any compartments. You can go ahead and create your services in the root compartment. But a good practice is to actually segregate your workloads by compartment. Compartments are on OCI logical constructs with which you can assign IAM permissions, policies, and groups to a certain set of users. So it's a very powerful feature which you can use to segregate your workloads in the cloud and roles and responsibilities. But in this case, we will just use the root compartment to get started. I'll just kind of flip back and forth between the lab and the actual window where we do this. So everybody who's going through the link, you will stay connected with what we're doing, right? So the first thing is to provision the VCN. So we would use the start VCN wizard to provision it quickly. With the wizard, you don't have to specify the different components of the network infrastructure which has to be provisioned. A lot of that is done automatically by this wizard. So go on and create the start VCN wizard stack. You can put in a name. In the lab, it is a thing called Analytics VCN test. You can select anything of your choice. Yeah. Apologies, let me just minimize the other one. Yeah. So let's call this Analytics VCN test. I'm going to use the root compartment. I'm going to use the same IP ranges. You can select this based on what your requirement is. Let's just to keep things simple, let's just use the default. So this creates a VCN, a virtual cloud network on this range, and it divides it into two further logical networks. So one would be a public facing network and the other is private. The MySQL HeatWave Cluster sits in the private subnet. And we would use DNS hostname resolution for this cloud network. Right. That's it. That's done. If you go view, it should take you now to the screen where your VCN is provisioned. Now, the first thing we have to do is we have to add the MySQL ports to the private subnet. Since MySQL HeatWave would be created in a virtual private network without a public IP, this is where we have to allow the MySQL ports. So if you go back again to the lab and go to step number, so this is what we have done essentially. Going back to step number 8 and 9. So in here, if you go to the private subnet, click on the security list. So security list in a way is a virtual access control list for this entire portion of the network, which allows any ingress or egress connections to the ports of your selection. It comes when we provision it, port number 22, which is SSH connection, comes default, and ICMP for ping-based traffic. So we will add the MySQL ports, create an ingress rule. You can be granular in here, but since this is a private network, you can allow 0.0.0.0. The MySQL ports have been listed here. So it's 3306, which is the default MySQL port, and 33060, which is for the MySQL X services. Right. So just add both of these ports in the destination port range and add ingress rules. Right. So that's done. That's again the same step. Second thing would be we would create a Bastion host. So the Bastion host or the jump host is to essentially make that connection from a public facing service to the MySQL cluster to run our queries and do the data load. So you can go back to the hamburger menu in the top left of your OCI console, go to compute instances to provision a Bastion host. You click on create instance. You can give this a name of your selection. Let's call it Bastion host. There's an always free eligible instances available. Please feel free to look at the page. I think, Birish, if you can please put that in the chat window for the audience to go ahead and look what is available with the always free stack.
Sure.
Thank you. And you can make a lot of these changes by just clicking on edit. So we are going to use the VCN which we created, Analytics VCN, and we will put this in a public subnet. Right. For the shape, since this is a Bastion host, it does not need to have too much of compute power or memory, but just to make things a little bit better, maybe we can change the shape from an always free. So you can actually see the always free eligible instances in the compute instance menu as well. So we've got the free credit, so you can use a larger instance shape size if you want. So that gives you 1 CPU and 8 gigs of memory, and that's the network bandwidth that comes with it. And there's different CPU types you can select. So you even got the Ampere A1 type instances. You've got the Intel and the AMDs. All right, so let's just go in there, select that. We've got the VCN. Let's create, so this is the public-private key pair which we'll use to log into your Bastion host. You can specify your own, or you can generate a key pair from here. Right. So let's just generate a key pair. And make sure you download the private key, because the private key, it will not be shown again. So if you're using the console, make sure that it's downloaded to your client workstation. We create it as it is, and let's go ahead and provision this. Now, while this is getting provisioned, so what we will do is we will use the Cloud Shell to log in and do some of the connectivity to MySQL and the load test. So for that, you can just click on this menu, Cloud Shell. So Cloud Shell is a web-based SSH client, you can say, in a way. It's also a small instance which comes with all of the OCI client based dependencies in the client installed. So you don't need to install OCI CLI on the Cloud Shell. And it just makes it that much easier to just, log in and get started. You don't have to have a PuTTY or a separate SSH client. You can do it straight up from the browser. Okay, so the Cloud Shell is up. And we've also got the Bastion host, which is up. So if you see that we have got the IP. So what we'll do is we'll use the Cloud Shell to log in to the Bastion host. So before that, you need to upload the key. So what you can do is just drag the key and just drop it in here, and the Cloud Shell automatically transfers it to the instance. So if I do an ls-ltr, I can see my keys in here. I'll just log in via SSH to that key to the Bastion host, and I'll just copy the public IP address of the Bastion host and just log into it. Brilliant. So I think that's because of the permission. There you go. So that quick permission, chmod fixed it. Now we are on the Bastion host. So again, going back to the lab, so some of the core infrastructure is provisioned for us to get started with MySQL HeatWave. I'll skip this part because we've gone through this in the lab. Okay. So we have done this part till step number 3. So what we'll do is now on the Bastion host, now that we logged into the Bastion host, we'll go ahead and install some of the MySQL tools before we actually provision the cluster. So all these commands have been given in the live lab. You can just copy it and just go to your Bastion host and paste it. And that's downloaded for you. Go back and do an install of that RPM. So while that's running, we will also install the MySQL shell. So these are some of the open source community tool which is already available. It's all the repositories of Oracle Linux has them, so you can just basically run a few commands and get started with all the MySQL tools. All right, let's just do a quick check. All right, so the tool has been installed successfully. Now this is the important bit. So we have already prepared for a sample data set. What we're going to use is the airport database sample set, where some of the flight related information and some of the airport information and where the flight has taken off from where it has landed has already been provided. It's a good data set to get started. So it looks at a lot of historical information and how you can leverage MySQL HeatWave technology to not just use your MySQL database as an OLTP application, but also to use the same instance for OLAP-based application. The amount, like we had in Nipun session, the amount of time it would take for you to create an ETL pipeline to unload data from MySQL, load it up onto another system and transform it, that effort and time can be saved with MySQL HeatWave. So it's a very powerful feature. It's a very unique feature in our cloud. And I think it saves a lot of data movement and data engineering work, and you can focus on your core business goals. Right. So let's probably get the. So the link has been provided in there, so you can download it straight up in the home directory. Yeah, that's where it is. So just a quick wget, save the file. It should not take more than a few minutes to get that data set in your instance. So while that is happening, so this is the part for the analytics. Virish, do you want to maybe just quickly run through this while, or do you want to provision this, or just maybe talk this through, and then we go back?
Sure, we'll go back to that one. So I'll just show that how to set up the Oracle instance, cloud instance.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Do you want me to keep my screen or?
Anything is possible. You can just stop for a second. I'll just take out my screen. I'll present the screen and then I'll show up how to set up the Oracle Analytics Cloud instance.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, all yours.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, we are already in the same instance while MDS is getting provisioned. We will also parallelly try to set up the Oracle Analytics Cloud instance. Oracle Cloud Analytics instance is analytics platform to do your all analytics workloads. So here we connecting from the Oracle Analytics Cloud to the MDS from the data, whatever the data data is residing in MDS, we can pull that into Analytics Cloud to build up our visualization and all kind of reports. To do that, from your main button, we can go to the Analytics and AI section, select the Analytics Cloud. The same again in the same compartment where you want to keep it. For time being, assuming you are all creating instances under the root compartment. So we are selecting the different compartment. Please ignore that for a second. For this lab, so you can create your Oracle Analytics Cloud instance under root compartment. So we have already created 2 instances to test this complete lab. So when you enter in this, you might not have any instances readily available. You can just go here and create an instance. So when you click on a create instance, the new screen come up, and then you can just name the instance, analytical instance, whatever you want to call it. So according to the lab, what is there, the name, you can just keep the name. So I'm gonna keep the name as OAC dev test, whatever the name you would like to keep it, you can keep the name here. Then if you want to airport analytics, whatever the description you would like to give it here, you can just suggest an optional. I would like to give it is airport analytics. This is the instance I'm being used for this one. And at the same time, you can select the compartment. So I would request you to leave it as it is to the root compartment where you are currently creating. So the Oracle Analytics instance, Oracle Analytical instance comes with the 2 feature sets. One is a self-service analytics and another one is a enterprise analytics. Self-service analytics is only used for the any kind of data visualization projects along with and the enterprise analytics feature sets is used for high-level analytics plus segmented analytics in the on the old-fashioned way of using the OBI platform. So for this, to do the MDS setup and then to compare with the MDS, to get the data from the MDS through the path channel and all, we would be requiring the enterprise analytics. So I'm going to use the enterprise analytics. And then to get started with this, how many OCPUs we require? You can start as low as 1, or you can go as high as 52. So for this highly depends on the data size, what we are trying to process from the MDS. So for this one, I would request you to either go with a 1 or a 2. So for the data size we are using is very minimal, so we can just go with a 1 CPU of size. At the same time, we will come here for the license type. This is again a license which is included. Fresh license will be included. Or if you have any kind of OBI license in the on-prem world, you can, if you want to bring them, you can go for this. For this lab, we'll go with the license included. You can just select the license included and then leave everything as it is and just click on the create. Once you just create section, the Oracle Analytics Cloud instance gets started creating. Sure, I'm going to create this. I'm going to click on a create. So this would take around 7 to 8 minutes approximately to provision the instance, to provision the analytics platform. Any questions or anybody facing any issue in terms of provisioning the OS instance? You can just feel free to let us know. So we will be help you. We will be going to help you. So it would take time. By the time we are going to load the data into MDS, from there we can pick up the data into analytics platform to do any kind of analytics.
Yeah, thanks, Paresh.
Sure. Over to you. Yeah.
All right. So now that so once you've done with the Oracle Analytics Cloud, you can go back to your instance where we had actually downloaded. So let's go ahead and unzip the data set. That's the. So a lot of this provisioning in this data set is already created. So loading the data would not require any sort of manual intervention. A lot of things is automated. Going back to the lab. So this is what Girish was talking about. Once you have provisioned the analytics instance, I think Girish will later show you how you can actually access the console. But let us go and to the MySQL part of the live lab first. All right. So before we actually load the data set, let's first actually go ahead and create the MySQL HeatWave cluster. It is provisioned in 2 steps. So the first step is to actually provision a MySQL database instance, which is HeatWave compatible. And then we would go ahead and add the HeatWave component to it. So let's minimize this for now. That shell is still in your browser. Click on the hamburger menu. Go to databases, MySQL, and the database system. Again, for those of us who are actually syncing with the live lab, that's lab number 1, task number 5. Create a MySQL DB system. Put in a name in here. Let's call it MySQL Analytics. Make sure you select HeatWave from here. So HeatWave is the analytics component cluster, which we would add later to it. If you will provision any of the other instance types, you would not be able to attach a HeatWave cluster to it. Create a username. Let's call this admin. In the lab, if you want to follow the lab, I would suggest to follow the username and password provided in the labs. So when you are connecting from Oracle Analytics Cloud, it will be that much easier to track it. So let's use the one which was in the live lab. For the networking, again, as we saw, we created the virtual cloud network, which is Analytics, VC, and Test, and we will provision it in a private subnet. The other information, you can leave it as default. This is the instance type which you would need to provision it, so leave this as is. I think Varish talked about this earlier. This is almost 1 terabyte. So leave that as it. If you want, you can keep the backups enabled. The important part of this section is to give the MySQL instance a host name. So please click on Advanced Options, go to Networking, and make sure that you provide a host name. So in our case, we are just calling this MySQL. And this is the port of MySQL, and this is the MySQL X protocol port. And both of these, if you remember earlier, we had added it to the virtual cloud networks security list. And let's just do a quick review before we provision it. Yeah, in the root compartment, and okay. Now, while that is being done, I'll show you once it gets provisioned. If you see this here, the HeatWave cluster here is still in the disabled state. Once the instance is up and running, that's when we will go ahead and enable HeatWave. All right, so let's go back to student. All right. So the second part of the lab, the first section we are done with, we can go to the lab 2. The lab 2 is to add the HeatWave cluster to the instance. We've got the other tenancy where we have pre-provisioned it. So again, due to the time we have allocated for this lab, if it might take some time, I can still show you from here. So this is we pre-provisioned it in one of our tenancies. So if you see that option in here earlier, which was disabled, once that gets provisioned, you can just click that button in there, and then you can provide some information about what is the HeatWave size you need for the cluster, and you can enable it. To check the status of HeatWave, you can scroll down and go to HeatWave, and it'll show you the nodes. So in our case, we have a 2-node cluster for HeatWave, so it'll show the status of HeatWave on the OCI console. There's certain events you can do with related to the cluster nodes. You can stop them, either you can restart them, or you can edit some information related to them. All right.
Pradap, does OAC require IDCS user mandatory, or can we use IAM user to log in?
I think Varish?
Yeah, IAM would be fine. Sure. It's not like compulsory IDCS. But as a root user, if they're in IDCS, of course, it goes for IDCS for the authentication. Is anyone facing the issue?
Hemant is having an issue. It shows that you must sign into Oracle Cloud as a federated Oracle Identity Cloud Service user to create an analytics instance.
Okay, let me check that. I'll respond to him.
So meanwhile, while that gets provisioned, maybe just to give you guys the task for the private access. This is to make sure that the MySQL data set can be accessed by Oracle Analytics Cloud. There is a configuration which needs to be made on the Oracle Analytics Cloud console. This is a step which typically takes about 40 minutes to 50 minutes to provision. And so once you're done with the Oracle Analytics Cloud setup, please go ahead and give lab number 2, task number 2 a try. It ensures that you have got access to your MySQL cluster when you need to access the data from the OAC instance. Again, we wouldn't be able to go through this step because it takes 50 minutes almost to provision. So we will skip this part and go to while the MySQL cluster is being provisioned to lab number 3. So lab number 3 is where we would be importing the data which we downloaded, the airport database, to the MySQL database service. And then from there, we would load it to the HeatWave cluster. Right. One of the prerequisites of reaching to lab number 3 is that you have all the resources in the previous 2 labs provision. So make sure that the HeatWave, the MySQL cluster is provisioned, the Bastion host is installed with the tools, and also the Oracle Analytics Cloud OAC instance has been provisioned. Let's give this some more time. Probably, Vrish, we'll give maybe 3-4 minutes more for the people who are trying it out to catch up, and then we can try the load.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Is there any more clarifications or questions from the audience?
Well, that's only Eamon's question is, I'm just checking that why it is not happening through the IDCS. Oh.
Cool.
Sure. Is anyone facing any other issues while provisioning the instances or making the connection, networking anywhere? Please let us know. So we'll take a pause for a minute.
Well, it didn't take a minute, so it was quick. So that's done. Let's maybe, because I think HeatWave would also take some time. So I think let me enable the HeatWave. So like I said, it's as easy as a click of a few buttons. So you click the enable in here. You select the shape. So keep the node count. So since this is a development environment, you can go with the minimum size. In a production, you can go with a higher node count and higher capacity. You just click on Add HeatWave Cluster, and that's it. So to check the status that it has already been provisioned, make sure that the state in here is active and the HeatWave nodes are visible on your console. Rish, maybe while this is being provisioned, maybe you want to give the Analytics Cloud, how does it look? Maybe a quick rundown. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Sure. Setting up the pack and everything.
Yeah, maybe just like a quick rundown of that part of setting up the pack, maybe.
Sure, I'm just sharing that. Yeah, currently this OAC is also currently running. I think maybe for everyone it's the same case. It takes around 10 minutes to get set up. Yeah. Okay. Luckily, it's got completed. Hi everyone. Once we have already set up the OAC instance, right? That's being provisioned. When you can see it's in an active state. So this is the Oracle Analytics Cloud instance. How did we access this one? Same way how we created. We came to the main menu, then we selected the Analytics AI, and then we selected the Analytics instance. So once you are here, you would be seeing that your Oracle Analytics instance, whatever we have created, it's in an active status. So we can access this analytics platform by clicking the URL, which is available here in this section, access information section. You just click on this URL, you will be getting into the analytics platform. So as it's the first time, it's taking a few minutes just to give us a few moments. Yes, here you can see this. We are now getting into the analytics platform. This is where we are going to create all the analytics workloads, creating the reports, any kind of dashboards, anything can be created in this analytics platform. So this is how it would look like. This is now currently the plain platform. Nothing has been created so far. From here, we should be able to make a connection to the different databases. So I will just walk you through the Oracle Analytics platform. So as you can see that this is the home screen. We can create catalogs. This is where you can set up and you can save a lot of projects, analytic projects here to the My folder, or if you can even put into the shared folders. The other team members from the same organization who are given the access to this platform will be able to access those analytics projects. From this platform, we can make a connection to the different data sets, different kind of databases readily available. Here we have a lot of database integration templates are readily available. So by using them, we can make a connection to the different databases. All the industry leading databases, we will be able to make a connection. For example, let's keep a MDS for a side for a second. If you want to connect to any of Oracle SaaS applications, Fusion applications, if you would like to make a connection, we can directly make a connection to SaaS application. From there, we are able to access the OTBI layer to do any kind of Oracle Analytics out of SaaS application, outside the application. At the same time, our Oracle Analytic databases or Oracle databases, any of the industry leading other databases, Azure, Amazon Redshift, BigQuery, these are the different templates are readily available to make a different databases. Now for this lab, since we are looking into the MySQL database, so if you want to make a connection to the MySQL database, we would click here. So this is where it would ask you the connection details, so which we are going to provide in a second, so that we can just set up all those, we can pass all this information, and we'll be able to make a connection to the MySQL database. Along with this, we will also come with a lot of machine learning platforms are also available in this OAC, so that we will be able to create any kind of readily available algorithm can be reused in this platform to create any sort of models, and then we can make it as a reusable models for the future data sets as well. So this is what Oracle Analytics platform brings for the analytical developers or for any kind of analytics workloads. That also can be used for any kind of analytic workloads. So since our MDS is being still provisioned, so once it is provisioned, we will be getting the connection details from there, and then we will make a connection to the MySQL database. Shadab, is MDS is up and running?
Not yet, British. Let me actually share my screen. I think we have about 7 minutes or only in our session, so we might have to actually skip and maybe just go through these steps. Let me just share my screen and is my screen visible?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is still provision. So let me maybe just give you guys a quick rundown of what has to be done so you can try it out for yourself for the data load. once you've got the file in your Bastion host, just switch to the directory where the dataset was available. Go into the lab. If you've created the username and the password which was provided in the lab, you can copy this command. In the IP address, you will have to provide the private IP of the MySQL cluster. So if you go to the section endpoint, this is what you will use to connect. So you can just copy this, put it in this command in the host with the port 3306 and the tag for the JavaScript, and just log into your MySQL cluster from your Bastion host. Once you're in the logged into the MySQL database, what you have to do is that you have to switch the context to SQL first. So either you can switch internally by putting a /SQL, or you can log in a new session with just the tag /SQL. Make sure you're in the same directory. The commands again are available. If you're in the same directory, all you have to do is a util.load dump of the path where the dataset sits. The first command is a dry run, just to ensure that you've got all your files and your folders in place. So run the command first. If it comes back successfully, which means everything you have done in this lab is correct, the next would be to actually set the dry run false flag and execute the load. We are providing 8 parallel threads because the instance which is in the lab is quite a decently sized instance, so you can run it in parallel. Once you do that command, you should be able to see that the load has been successful. It takes about 3 to 4 minutes at the max for the data set to be inserted into the MySQL cluster. It creates a separate database called Airport DB. So if you log into the SQL shell, MySQL shell again, and show databases, it will show you a database called Airport DB. If you want to check the tables, just to list the tables, just do a show tables, and you will see a list of about 15 odd tables which are created in this data set. Right now, since we have not really loaded anything onto the MySQL HeatWaves part of things, you can just run a query which is already provided in a lab and see the results. So when you will run this query without the HeatWave components of accelerating your queries in memory, you would see this query return in about 13 seconds. That's what time it'll take. Exit from your shell. And if you have already provisioned the HeatWave cluster and it's an active state, so this is what you will see in here. So once that cluster, which is still being provisioned, you will see both the nodes and the cluster in the active state. Log back in again using the same MySQL shell command and providing the private IP of your cluster. To load your database into HeatWave cluster, you have to use this command. So it essentially calls a stored procedure, which is in the system dictionary, and it loads your airport database to the HeatWave cluster. It takes very few seconds for the data to be actually loaded onto the HeatWave cluster. To verify, if you want to verify your tables are loaded, just use the performance schema and run this query, and the query will basically show you a load status. So if your load status look like available _ RPDG stab state, it means you have successfully loaded your data to the MySQL HeatWave acceleration engine. Before executing the query, this is where the proverbial magic begins. So set your engine, your storage engine, to use the secondary engine. So set this flag in from your MySQL shell, just to do a verify to check the secondary engine is on. The first query is just an explain plan. So it shows you the path the optimizer of MySQL will take to accelerate your query. If you remember the previous part, we executed the query. It took 12 seconds, but it was not there was no in-memory HeatWave component there, but we have loaded it now. So if you do an explain and try to understand what the MySQL optimizer is taking the path to execute that select statement. When you see the plan, you would see, if you see that first row in here, it says just below that extra, using temporary, using file sort, secondary engine rapid. So that means it's the MySQL optimizer is using the MySQL, the HeatWave cluster for running the select statement and giving you the output. And you can see the difference by, so this is the same query which we ran earlier. Copy the query. Once you've loaded it, execute it, it's less than a second, or at the max, it'll be a second or 1.5 seconds. It won't go beyond that. So that's the amount of, on even a very small data set and a not very complex data set, you can see the instant result on running an analytics query, right? I think this is from the MySQL part, and maybe I think Virish, before we end the session, you can actually show the audience maybe the analytics part of that integration.
Sure.
So I'm stopping my screen. All yours.
Sure. Yeah, once we have the data in place in MDS, which is nothing but our MySQL database. So from our analytics platform, we will be able to make a connection. So while Shradha was explaining that, I've already made the connection, which I'm going to show you how I made this. We can see here, second here, I just selected here from the create, from the connection part. I have selected the MySQL template, and then I have given these details and then quickly save the data. So while doing this, if you are using your, like any of your organization laptops, if you are in any kind of VPN, so you'll have to come out of that, and then only we'll be able to make a connection to this database. So we are not supposed to be in any of the VPN. So here you can see this is the connection I've already made. So I have given the host details from the MDS platform, what is the port number. This is the database name we created, and then this is the admin, and then I've also given the password. So once we make this, so we will be able to make a connection to the database. So we have made the database, we have made the connection to the database successfully. Now we want to access that data. So what I'm going to do is here, from this connection, I'm going to tell to the system to tell me create a data set. Once I go here, it would bring based on the which username and password I am using, and then that user is being what are the schemas being accessed to that user, we will be able to get that information. See, this is the way you all have created the airport database. So once you click here,
just one sec. Sorry, Avrish, to interrupt you. Yeah. So for the audience who's syncing with the live lab, this is lab number 4, which Virish is showing. So this is the final section of the lab to create the integration from Oracle Analytics Cloud to MySQL HeatWave. Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Virish, please. Thank you.
Sure. So as you can see that these are the number of tables under the airport DB schema. All the tables are readily available here. If you want to create the data set, if you want to merge these two, if you want to combine the two tables and you want to create a single data set, all those functionalities can be done easily in this platform. To keep it simple for the today's lab, I am going to use the table called View Analytics. So I'm going to just drag and drop this table, which we have created for the ease of use for this lab. So I'm selecting the table called View Analytics. So once I drag and drop that table, what is the structure of that table? That is going to it's fetching the table metadata, and then it will show me that what are the table IDs, what are the columns are readily available in this data set. So now once it is there, I'm just going to save this data set. So I'm going to save this data set as View Analytics. So here you can see this. I have created a data set out of the table which is currently available in MDS. By making the connection to the database, I'm accessing the schema called Airport DB. Under that, I'm accessing the table called View Analytics. Once I have created this, if you want to do any kind of data wrangling functions or any data preparation, you can be done in this platform. For time being, I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm directly moving into creating the project. This is where we are getting into the visualization mode. From here, we'll be able to create a visualizations. So this is, as we are saying, this is a self-service analytics is the concept behind the Oracle Analytics Cloud data visualization platform. So here you can just select whatever the metrics and then whatever the attributes and metrics are readily available, you will be able to pick them up. So I'm going to select passenger ID plus country. So I'm just dragging and dropping these two here. System has an intelligence automatically to predict which visualization would be the better fit for these data types. So system is going to create the analytics for me. So if any case, if you want to change the visualization type, we have the 30 different palettes are readily available in the system. So we would like to change it to the pie chart or any changes with a few clicks, we'll be able to make a changes to the system, to the visualizations. And then you can save these projects at any time. You can save this project in your catalog. As I mentioned in the earlier, either you want to make it public, you'll have to save it in the shared folder. If you want to make it, if you want to keep it private, you'll have to keep it in the, you'll have to save it in your my folder. So I'm going to save it in the shared folder as a.
So here's this is where HeatWave excels, right? So what Varish has been showing on the screen, this is essentially a connection to an OLTP database where all you had to do was execute a command and run it like an analytics data warehouse. So the effort of actually creating an ETL pipeline, unloading that data to somewhere in a staging area and then loading it into a data warehouse, and the effort of connecting to another data source is saved by just attaching a HeatWave cluster to your MySQL instance. So it could be an e-commerce application or a Shopify-based application. Let's say you're running in the cloud and you need to do analytics. There's no need to having an analytics data warehouse to run quick analytics. You can just attach the HeatWave cluster and create your real-time dashboards on that without any sort of data movement. So that's one of the unique offerings of the OCI MySQL HeatWave.
Along with that, whatever the queries sent by our analytics platform would be select queries automatically. Just we are trying to fetch the data out of our platform. So what does our HeatWave cluster does? This analytics select queries automatically uploaded to the HeatWave cluster. That is where our select queries get executed. That's how query execution get accelerated, and you would get a results in a much faster way, which is approximately up to 400 times. It would be faster than the InnoDB engine, as we seen in the previous section. This is how you can create a project. This is a simple project. From here, you can start creating any other projects. There are a lot of features available in the Oracle Analytics platform as well. In terms of using the built-in AI platforms, you can just tell the system to explain the attributes. All these different kind of analytics, these kind of features would help you to create your reports as quickly as possible. So here I'm just trying to explain this feature. So here this system would automatically find a relationship between country with other data points readily available in this data set, and then it would give you the lot of other analytics, a lot of visualization for me. So whatever the things we would like to keep it, you can just select them. With a few clicks, we'll be able to make a difference. So I'm just selecting country with respect to booking IDs. It's already creating this visualization for me, and then I'm going to select. So boom, I'm able to make these reports in a few seconds. So this is how you can make a connection to, yeah.
Right.
So
I think the last part is also completed, right?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. So thank you, guys.